Hi, this is Ann Holmes. Today we're going to experiment with a new project. I want to make a more modern or contemporary quilt, and I thought I'd show you through the process. Okay, my inspiration for this project is the roof line of the Native American Museum in Washington, D.C. I took a couple photographs, and then what I do to make a line drawing is I take a piece of clear plastic with a Sharpie, a narrow point Sharpie, and trace the lines. And then I take a photograph of that, just put it on my copier, make a copy, and then I take it to a blueprint shop and have it blown up. But I had a couple photographs, so I experimented first to see which one I was going to like better. And then I turned the drawing several different ways. And anyway, this kind of looks like a funky spider. So I'm not going to use that. It's kind of interesting, but and then it's more pieces. It's almost double the amount of pieces. And so I wanted to do a simpler project, kind of keep it clean and simple. So this was the one I chose, and this is the one I chose. And then I did a black and white image of it too, but my printer's acting up right now, so I got all these streaks. But anyway, this helps you to see the value a little bit. It's almost white on white here. But for my entryway, this is going to be an entryway quilt. I decided I wanted to use more golden fabrics. At first, I went from white to gray when using those colors, but I don't want things gray in my entryway. I want to have it a more golden appearance. So anyway, I laid out a bunch of fabric first, and then hopefully as I move along, after I make my pattern, I'll know for sure what fabrics I want to use. All right, so this is our enlarged drawing, and it looks rather rough, but when I make the freezer paper copy for our patterns, I'm going to be able to smooth out some of these lines. All right, so we're just using the freezer paper from the grocery store. It comes off the roll, it's all rolled up. So I rolled it back the other way so it'll lay a little bit flatter. And then we need two pieces of this, two widths of this for our design. All right, now we've spread the two pieces of freezer paper over the top of our drawing and joined it with a beige masking tape because you can see through it better than you could if it was the blue tape. And you can iron over this. This is will be our freezer paper patterns that we're using. So the first thing we did is, because of our drawing was a little distorted when you enlarge it to 4 times the original size, I used a big square to try to square the edges of the quilt up. And then this inside line is going to be the finished edge of the quilt. And then I added an extra 1/2 inch. All right, there's a lot of detail in this brick here, but it's washed out because of the sunlight shining on it. So we're going to add this texture to it when we do the stitching and quilting at the same time. So we just marked a few lines here with a dotted line, which indicates that would be done with stitching. But these are our pattern pieces. We put a few pieces, straight lines through to create some pattern pieces. And so we have our drawing, and we tried to smooth out some of our lines. We have to make sure that everything is numbered the same way it is down below. And then it's very important to go ahead and add some, same way here. This is stitching with the dotted line, but this is one pattern piece here. So between the pattern pieces, we need to be sure and put lots of registration marks so we can fit this together the way it's supposed to be when we're building our quilt top. All right, I intend this to be a more modern quilt or a contemporary quilt. A modern quilt, oftentimes it's described as like a traditional quilt that's been disassembled in separating the pieces, and there's more negative space. So anyway, this wall hanging that's only going to be about 32 high by 44 wide is kind of contemporary. I'm going to use a lot of golden values, and it helps sometimes if you know what a ruby beholder is. When you hold this up to your fabric, you can tell which piece is lighter or darker. So that helps a little bit. That's a trick to know. These ruby beholders are very handy. All right, we've spread one continuous piece of French fuse over our drawing with the textured side up, and use blue tape to hold it in place. We're not stretching it, we're just spreading it out and then using the blue tape to hold it in place. And then we've cut off, I always start by cutting off the excess perimeter of our pattern first, but you also notice how we extended the pattern piece into that extra 1/2 inch seam allowance we did, because that is one pattern piece. We're not cutting that inside line off. Will be the finished edge of the quilt with an extension of an extra 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, so after we have the French fuse down, then we lay our pattern pieces, after we've cut them out, directly on where they're going to go. Just place them there, and if they curl up too much, you can just put a few creases in them or something to make them lay flat. But what I do is just chunk it up first into bigger pieces and then cut the smaller pieces out of that. So we're going to go ahead and cut all this out, and then when it's laid out like this, then it's easier to go through your fabrics and make your fabric selections. Then you just pick up the piece you want to be on a certain color and lay it down. You notice in this design, these are windows here, and it appears that there's stripes there, so I was going to use stripy fabric. Also notice that there seem to be some reflections of the sky here in the glass. So when I was first considering this, I thought about this fabric because I could use some of this dark area as the reflection perhaps. And so I put some dotted lines again on some of the pattern pieces for the glass, because it so I can line it up with these stripes and kind of fussy cut in the orientation that might give me that feeling of that glass. And then when I was looking for that, I also saw this. So this is a possibility also, but we'll just wait and see. With no sewing into Tea Quilted, you can edit your work. If you put something down you really don't like, you can change fabric. We hope you'll continue watching us build this more modern or contemporary quilt. And I hope you'll consider No Sewing Until You Quilt It for your next project.